Welcome to Beyond the Veil, the channel that unveils the mysteries hidden between myth, history, and legend. Here, we explore what lies behind the stories that have passed through the centuries, because every myth has a grain of truth. If you too are fascinated by the unknown, subscribe and get ready to look beyond the veil of reality. What if something fed on the dead and the living? In the darkest folds of the night, when silence grows so thick it chokes the breath, there are creatures that move through the shadows. They are not zombies, mindless and willless. They are not mere ghosts, drifting like smoke. Ghouls are something else, intelligent, ravenous, cunning. Predators born from the horror of death and the primal instinct to survive at any cost. Drawn to corpses, they lurk on the edges of cemeteries, in forgotten deserts, or perhaps closer than you might think. In this journey, we'll dig deep. We'll return to ancient Arab legends, pass through the terrors of medieval Europe, and arrive at modern interpretations in video games and horror literature. Get ready, because what hides in the night doesn't just watch, it waits to strike. In the burning heart of the Arabian deserts, among endless dunes and ruins buried by time, the myth of the ghoul is born. Its name, which in Arabic means devourer or destroyer, was whispered around nighttime fires, in chilling tales that slithered through nomadic tribes. In the stories of 1001 Nights, ghouls are shapeshifters, demons capable of taking human form to deceive travelers. They waited, hidden in the desert's shadows, luring unsuspecting wanderers toward a slow and horrifying death. With promises of non-existent oases or miraculous shelters, they led their prey to remote places, far from any hope of rescue, and then fed on their flesh. But ghouls were not mere beasts. They were tied to the world of the jinn, powerful and ancient spirits that, according to Islamic tradition, exist alongside humanity, invisible but deadly. Some ghouls were even described as corrupted jinn, lost in the dark sands of time, consumed by a hunger for flesh and a thirst for souls. In the oldest legends, facing a ghoul meant more than battling a monster. It meant confronting darkness itself, a force capable of devouring not just the body, but the soul. And this is only the beginning. As the stories of Arab merchants and travelers spread along trade routes into Europe, the myth of the ghoul changed. It became tainted, adapted to the nightmares of the old continent. In the Middle Ages, ghouls began to blend with other dark figures. Vampires, revenants, restless spirits returned from the grave. No longer just flesh-eaters, they became beings capable of rising from cemeteries to haunt the living, defile sacred places, and shatter the fragile boundary between life and death. Medieval texts told of corpses crawling from their tombs, not driven by a thirst for blood, but by a disturbing hunger for rotting flesh. In an age haunted by death, plagues, wars, famines, the fear of ghouls became a reflection of a deeper obsession, the desecration of the body, the violation of final rest. Ghouls came to symbolize all that escapes human control, decay, corruption, the return of the impure. In villages, it was feared that a corpse not properly buried might transform into one of these creatures, and so protective rituals multiplied. Nails hammered into the mouths of the dead, stones placed atop graves, talismans hidden inside coffins. In the darkness of cathedrals and the alleys of medieval cities, the ghoul lingered as a silent threat, a macabre reminder that even in death, we were never truly safe. And as the myth continued to evolve, a new darkness was preparing to emerge. Over the centuries, the image of the ghoul didn't vanish into darkness. It simply transformed, adapting to the new nightmares of modern culture. It was H.P. Lovecraft, the master of cosmic horror, who breathed new life into the ghoul within his mythos. In his stories, these creatures are not merely corpse eaters, but an entire race, deformed, grotesque beings who dwell deep underground, in forgotten catacombs and tunnels beneath cities. Lovecraft describes them as intelligent, cunning, capable of forming primitive societies, eternally hungry for dead flesh, yet possessing a dark civilization of their own. In time, ghouls crept into the world of video games and role-playing games as well. In Fallout, ghouls are victims of radiation, humans turned into immortal, decaying beings, often shunned and discriminated against. In The Witcher, they appear as terrifying monsters roaming battlefields, drawn to the scent of death. And in Dungeons & Dragons, ghouls are demonic creatures who feast on the flesh of the living, parasites of crypts and the deepest dungeons. These modern interpretations preserve the ancient ghouls' primal hunger, but amplify their traits: the physical horror, the sadness of their condition, the struggle between what remains human and the beast that devours it. From the Arab myth to the pixels on our screens, the ghoul has changed. But one thing remains: the chill we feel when we imagine that, perhaps beneath us, in the darkness we dare not explore, something hungry is still waiting. But the most unsettling question still lingers in the air. Are ghouls merely legends, or do they truly exist? From an anthropological perspective, the origin of the ghoul myth may lie in ancient, deep-rooted fears embedded in the collective unconscious. For millennia, cemeteries have been places of terror, not just out of respect for the dead, but out of fear of what might lurk among the graves. The taboo of necrophagy, the consumption of human flesh, has always represented one of the greatest horrors across cultures, a boundary only the most desperate or the cursed would dare to cross. In extreme conditions, such as devastating famines or prolonged sieges, documented cases of cannibalism have occurred, and perhaps it is from these very tragedies that the myth of the ghoul found new life. The idea that those who feed on the dead slowly lose their humanity, becoming corrupted, irredeemable beings. Even today, in some remote regions, the superstitions have not entirely vanished. Folk tales still speak of shadows roaming near cemeteries on moonless nights, of graves mysteriously disturbed, of whispers rising from freshly turned earth. In parts of the Middle East, Africa, and even some rural areas of Europe, the word ghoul is still used to describe dark creatures, malevolent spirits, or people suspected of forbidden practices. Perhaps ghouls never truly existed as we imagine them, but the fear they represent, that ancient hunger, that dread of the unknown, is more real than ever. If you came face to face with a ghoul, would you know how to survive? In ancient legends, protecting oneself from these creatures was anything but simple. It was said that ghouls could change shape, deceive the human eye, posing as travelers or wounded animals to lure their victims. And that deception was the most fatal mistake, believing what you see. Some tales warned never to trust lone wanderers encountered in the desert or near cemeteries, especially if they seemed strange or refused to speak. Others advised never to venture out at night into places of death without carrying protective charms, blessed objects, religious symbols, or talismans against evil spirits. In some traditions, fire was believed to be one of the few effective defenses. Ghouls, like many dark creatures, feared the light and heat of flames. Salt, too, a purifying element, was scattered around graves or across paths to prevent ghouls from rising from the earth. But the most disturbing truth is this: once in a ghoul's grasp, few ever escaped. Their strength, their cunning, and their hunger made them nearly unstoppable predators. If ghouls truly exist, survival would depend on one fundamental rule: never approach what the night wants to hide. Trust your instincts. Stay in the light. And above all, never listen to the voices calling you from the dark. For centuries, ghouls have slithered through the shadows of our imagination, eternal devourers of death and darkness. But why do these creatures continue to hold such a deep and disturbing grip on us? Perhaps because ghouls don't just represent the terror of death, but the ancient fear of what lies beyond life in the places we refuse to look. They embody the ultimate taboo, the desecration of the dead, the crossing of the sacred boundary between the world of the living and the realm of the deceased. The fear of ghouls is the fear of the unseen, the unspoken, of what we might find if we dared to venture too far, into lands forgotten by the light. And yet, within that horror, there's attraction too, a dark pull that dares us to test the limits of our courage, our curiosity, and our very humanity. In their nighttime whisper, ghouls remind us that the unknown is never far away, that it only takes one wrong step, one moment of distraction, to be swallowed by the dark. So, tell me, would you face a ghoul to uncover the truth that hides in the night? If you enjoyed this journey, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and get ready, because the next monster might be much closer than you think.